That's awesome. I love that. Thank you.
Please. Turn off my ringer. Hello and welcome. Are we ready to roll? We're rolling. Okay. Hi, my name is Rick Kamak. I am the Executive Director of Industry Relations for ICE. Some of you may know me. I fill in as instructor from time to time. I was the dean years ago. My only guest today has about the longest bio I've ever seen, so you'll have to forgive me. I usually memorize these things. It's not happening today. Our chef, Gavin, was born in Thousand Oaks, California. He was a graduate of the New England Culinary Institute. In 2007, he represented USA in Bocuse d'Or. That same year, he was named top 10 new chef by Food and Wine. It keeps going, hang in there. In 2008, he won the James Beard Award for Rising Chef Star of the Year. With Team USA for Bocuse d'Or, with Thomas Keller and Daniel Boulud, they won a silver medal in 2015, huge accomplishment. Previous to his move to Minneapolis, he served as executive director and executive chef, and director of culinary operations for Daniel Boulud in New York City, overseeing Cafe Boulud and Palm Beach, Toronto, and New York City. He is now the chef and the owner of Soigné Hospitality Group in Minneapolis, consisting of Spoon and Stable, Cook's Belcour, there's 3 of those, Demi, Soka, and Mara in Minneapolis. He's passionate about mentorship and creating a more professional work environment for hospitalitarians. It's a new word for me. Chef opened his first restaurant, Spoon and Stable, in the North Loop neighborhood of Minneapolis in November of 2014. In 2015 was Restaurateur of the Year, the 2015 Restaurant of the Year by Food and Wine, a Best New Restaurant by Bon Appetit, and was the 2015 James Beard Award finalist for Best New Restaurant. He also won Best Chef Midwest 2018. In 22, he released his first cookbook, At Home, filled with approachable recipes to inspire novices and professionals, and as a judge on Food Network's Bobby's Triple Threat. In 23, Minneapolis St. Paul Business Journal named Chef one of the city's most admired CEOs, and Star Tribune recognized him as one of the 50 people changing the way Minneapolis eats. Minnesotans eat, sorry. In 24, his intimate tasting menu restaurant, Demi, was the only independent restaurant welcomed into the global Relay and Chef family. Welcome, Chef Kaysen.
Wow, thanks. Good job.
Congrats on being welcomed into Relay and Chateau.
Thank you.
An interesting award for an independent. Are you surprised by that?
Yeah, I mean, very much so. The whole process of Relay and Chateau, I don't know how much everybody knows, but the Relay Chateau Award was started, or the organization was started in France, and it was primarily built for small inns and hotels. There's a little over 580 of them around the world, and there's a little over 100 independent restaurants around the world that are part of the organization. And to get in, somebody who is in the organization already has to basically vouch for you and write a letter. So Danielle did, Thomas Keller did, and Patrick O'Connell did, who's the president for Relay Chateau of North America. So that probably helped, expedite the process a little bit. But what's crazy is which I didn't know, is that they come and they inspect you, right? And it's completely anonymous. You have no idea. They have 3 different things that they look at in terms of their criteria during the inspection process. And when they're done eating and they've paid their bill, they then tell you that they're from Relay and Chateau. So one of our inspectors that I talked to, she was from Mexico City, flew up to Minneapolis, God bless her, in the winter to have dinner with us, and then flew home. And then they call you and they tell you you either got in or you didn't get in. So we were genuinely surprised and super excited and honored. And as you mentioned, it was the only independent restaurant in the world to be accepted this year. That will, I'm sure, change next year. There'll be another one, I hope, and I assume. But it's a nice family to be part of.
Great. let's flip the switch a little bit. Talk about what inspired you to get into the business. I read something about Subway being part of your inspiration.
Totally. I was a certified sandwich artist. So when I was I grew up in Minneapolis. I was 15, and my mom said, "You got to get a job that's not mowing lawns." Not that that wasn't paying me good money, but it was like, if it's too rainy, then you sit on the couch, if whatever, right? There's all of these opportunities for excuse. And so I went to a Subway, and I got a job at a Subway. Now listen, I'm 44 years old, so this is 30 years ago, okay? But what I remember from being there was that people who wear suits every day tend to eat the same thing for breakfast and or lunch every day. It's like clockwork. And they do it because their day is filled with a lot of decisions. And so if you can eliminate certain decisions in your day like that, which is very simple, you do it. So I would memorize the same people that would come in every single day, and I would write down what they would order. So instead of them waiting in line, I would just make your sandwich for you and say, your sandwich is at the register. I'll see you tomorrow.
They call that Resi today.
Right, they call that Resi today. They call it a lot of things. And so it was, and this guy moves in next door and opened up a French restaurant, or an Italian restaurant, sorry, and offered me $1 more an hour, and so I started to work for him. And that really started the intentionality of being in this profession. But I certainly knew at age 15 that I would do this the rest of my life. I loved every minute of it.
So you were born in California.
Yep.
You went to culinary school in New England.
Yep.
You worked in New York, and then a little bit, it sounds like, all over the world. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so I left. So the way that Necky was built, which is no longer around, as you may or may not know, is that you would do 6 months of school. You would do an internship for up to 6 months. There was an hour allotment, but you could pretty much just stay where you were for 6 months. You go back, do another 6 months, then you do a final internship. So my first year, I went to Napa Valley, and I was at Domaine Chandon. Went back to school, and then my father had a business that he was running, which was headquartered in Switzerland. It was in Lausanne. And so as a totally ignorant and frankly, just like naive American, I called this chef in Switzerland and said, "I'd like to work for you. My dad eats here all the time." He says, "The restaurant's amazing." And the guy says, "Do you speak French?" I said, "Not one word." He says, "It's great. You'll figure it out." And which was a little bit harder to figure out. And he says, "Are you coming to?" And I said, "I'm coming to learn. I just need to make enough money to pay rent." And so I moved to Switzerland. And then that was the last resume I've ever made in my life, because I then just sort of listened to each chef and they would sort of move me around. So I was in Switzerland for a while. After my time there, he introduced me to this hotshot chef in London who just got 3 Michelin stars named Gordon Ramsay. Said, "You should go work for this guy. He's kind of this hot shit." So I went and worked with Gordon, but I couldn't get my visa on time. So I worked for Gordon's mentor, Marco Pierre White, to be paid. And then I worked for Gordon to not be paid. Which was just a day a week, or it would depend. And then I went from Europe, moved to San Diego, was in San Diego for a stint, and then New York City with Danielle, and then back to Minneapolis, which I never thought in a million years I'd move back to Minneapolis. It was never, not to say that it wasn't part of the plan. I guess in hindsight, I'm not necessarily sure I had a plan in that regard. But what I did know when I was working for Danielle, he had given me, in the last 2 years of my life with him, he had given me a really important role that he had not given many people, which was I had a partnership role in the Café Bleu brand, and I was kind of going up and down the coast to oversee all these restaurants. And I thought that was it. Like, that's exactly what I wanted. But in reality, what I really wanted is I wanted to own my own restaurant, and I wanted to have my own group. And he was so gracious about it. I always talked through it with him. It was never a caught by surprise, here's my 1 month notice type of situation. And all of that to be said, then he actually ended up turning around and investing in my company and becoming a partner in our company today.
Very cool. We're going to get to the entrepreneurship in a moment. You talked a little bit about the make no money, make money, and decisions that you made. So typically a tough business, obviously work a lot of hours. Oftentimes you make little pay. What kept you at it?
I guess I never really looked at it. I never really looked at the moments of little pay as a negative, because I'm sort of an optimist by my own character. So I just genuinely believe things will end up working itself out. And I sort of was, that's how I lived. That's how I continue to live. And so, you know, the money was not what motivated me or demotivated me. I knew that eventually I would find a way to make money. I'm really a sponge when it comes to learning what you can learn. And I think that that's very important because that knowledge is so powerful when you grow up in this business. And I think it's very easy to have no patience and want to move on and go from A to Z or A to F really quickly. But when you take the smaller steps and the slower steps and you're more methodical and intentional about it, it makes the journey a lot more fun.
Talk about the transition from being a chef to being a chef/entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's definitely a transition. I mean, I will say, you know, when I was with Danielle, I had a lot of options and opportunity for entrepreneurship, but at the end of the day, it still wasn't mine. You know, I think that I take a lot of pride in the fact that people wake up every day expecting me to be financially responsible for them to find success, right? So one of the biggest compliments that I feel I indirectly get is when I hear people who work for me say that they bought a car, they bought a house, they're getting married, they're having children, whatever it is, because they're doing something that makes them feel comfortable with what their financial means are, which is why they've taken that life risk of buying a house or whatever it might be. And I take a lot of responsibility and pride in that. But you have to, it's a different mindset from just being a chef. You know, in the kitchen, a lot of it is yes, chef, yes, chef, yes, chef. If you build a business and you put people around you that only say yes, it's not a good thing for the business. And it's not a good thing for you. You know, you need people around you that will question what you do, will push back on what you have to say, and have like real discussion. And I think that if you don't allow for that discussion, for that vulnerability to happen with you and your team, and even more so if you can't admit when you're wrong and you're the leader, you'll never really get that spirit of entrepreneurship amongst your staff.
Makes sense. So your first venture, I believe it was Spoon and Stable?
Yep, first solo.
Yeah, right. So you won Best Restaurant nominee, I believe?
Yep.
So it must have felt pretty good.
Yeah, it was a crazy first year. I mean, it was, you know, when we opened that restaurant, so it was 2014, it was in November, and let me talk about like thrown into the gutters of entrepreneurship. So I was doing an interview with some press, and I think I was doing a photo shoot actually. And one of my managers came to me and said, "Chef, we were using OpenTable at the time. OpenTable turned the reservation system on 1 week prior to us being open." And I said, "Okay, how long has that been on for?" And he says, 20 minutes. I said, "How many reservations do we have?" And he's like, 680. And I was like, "Turn it off." So we turned it off. And we individually called every single reservation to say that there was an error on OpenTable. But I said, I'll tell you what, I'll open up 3 days before if you can come on this Friday or this Saturday or this Sunday. And then this is the time you come at. Just don't tell anybody we're open and I'll just cook for you. Of course, everybody said yes.
That was your version of a soft open.
100%. And so I gave everybody champagne. I comped all this food, and then I set the whole bill to OpenTable. I said, "You pay for it."
Did they?
Of course they did.
Oh, that's great.
The negative press would have beat them more. So, and then they gave me OpenTable free for 1 year, and I took it for a year. And then after they started to charge me, I dumped them and I went to talk.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, there you go.
Entrepreneurship. Don't get too comfortable with anybody.
Pay back some
you know?
much, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, they're looking for the dime just like you. So.
Okay, let's talk about Soigné Hospitality Group. How it came to be, and what is it like to now run a total organization as opposed to a single venue?
Yeah, I mean, it takes time to run it and to create it. You know, Soigné started out as just Spoon and Stable, and that was the DBA for it, and the doing business as was Spoon and Stable, and you know, I had then opened up a restaurant called Belcourt, which was both a bakery and a restaurant, which I closed during COVID. COVID was not necessarily the reason I closed it. But it gave me an opportunity to close it, so I took it and basically cashed out on it to make sure everybody could be on the up and up, because it was never going to be what I wanted it to eventually become. I turned that closure into opening 3 bakeries. So that's called Cook's Belcourt. So it's a bakery that's joined with a retail company. So we sell, it's like a little mini Williams Sonoma, for lack of better description. We do cooking classes by night, we do bakery by day, and then we sell retail all day. So we have 3 of those in the Twin Cities. And then we added Mara, which was in the Four Seasons. We have a cafe there called Soka Cafe as well. And then we have a catering company called KZ Provisioning, which is where we cook exclusively behind the scenes for professional athletes. So we cook for the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Minnesota Lynx, and the Minnesota Wild. So all of our basketball and hockey teams. You know, creating, I mean, it sounds like, wow, you create all this and then it just works. Like, it's been so much work to build the infrastructure, to find the right people, you know, and to have people sort of be set in the same vision and direction that you want them to go into, but while also asking them to challenge what it is we're doing to make sure we're doing the right thing. You know, COVID kicked our ass, like everybody. Minneapolis had more. COVID wasn't as nearly as a challenge as George Floyd's murder. That really changed the whole landscape of our community. Made the community quite stronger, frankly. But you know, it's just that when you're running a company and you're dealing with all of those things that nobody can teach you how to deal with ever, it's a completely different ballgame. So I relied on a lot of our team to help us get through all that, whether it was building it and coasting through all the other stuff. So it was incredible.
Okay, so you know, you worked all over the world. You worked in New York. You worked up and down the coast, as you say. We talked a little bit about Minneapolis. Why go back there and open up your hospitality group?
Yeah, you know, to be honest, like I said, I never thought I'd move back there, but I think that the way that when I was living in New York, I could see smaller markets, I'll call them B market cities, like Minneapolis, Nashville.
Secondary.
Yeah,
Secondary cities.
right. All secondary cities. Like you could see sort of this like culinary boom happening in all these different cities. Some were way more aggressive than others. Some had more maturity than others. Some got a lot more press than others. Didn't make them better. They just got great press. But it showed me that I didn't have to live in New York City. It showed me I didn't have to live in San Francisco. I didn't have to live in LA or Chicago to build what it is that I wanted to build. And so what it came down to was, how do I want to live? And I did not want to live how I was living here. I have 3 sons. At the time, my 2 oldest were my 2 were 3 and 5. They're now 14 and 12. We have a 3rd son too, but he wasn't born here. And you know, it's just it wasn't exactly how I wanted my kids to be around family. My parents, my brother. You know, my wife is from Sweden, so we don't have her family close by. So I started to ask myself questions that had, frankly, very little to do with my profession, and had everything to do with how I felt as a person. And once I started to figure that out, that's what dictated where I wanted to live.
So a little bit of a work-life balance as well. Right?
I think so. I mean, what's crazy is I work more now than I did when I lived here, but nonetheless, you know, at least the facade is that there's a little bit more balance. I will say what there is that there's more of an acceptance if you're not there.
Yeah.
Right? There's more of an acceptance. You know, here it can be, I just wanted to have an opportunity to make the decision that if my son was playing in a hockey game or a baseball game or soccer game or whatever, if that game was at 7:00 and I wanted to leave and go watch the game, I could leave. It doesn't mean I don't go back to work. I do, but I just want to leave and go watch their game.
Right. So we talk a lot about key performance indicators in our business, and it just reminded me of going from New York to Minneapolis. I'm assuming occupancy cost is a bit better in Minneapolis than it is in New York.
So crazy.
Probably about a third, I would guess.
Probably less. I mean, listen, when I found Spoon and Sable space, so when I walked into Spoon, it was an office building. So it was Class D, which meant we had to apply for it to be Class A for restaurant. And I walked in, and it was like, right when I walked in, what is our bar now was their boardroom. What is our kitchen was all cubicles, 7,000 square feet. And what they said rent was, I paid more in my apartment here that was 1,100 square feet. I was like, can I have 10 of these? You know, more of these buildings. And that's how I found a lot of the buildings. Even where Demi is, so Demi is behind Spoon and Sable. It's in a separate building, but it's behind us on 2nd Street. It's 1,200 square feet. I mean, the rent is so inexpensive, but it allows
30
us.
a square foot sounds about right.
It's less than that.
It's less than that. Yeah. I was in Philadelphia recently. It's 40.
40 in
But,
Philly.
it's
Yeah.
about 150.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, listen, what it allows for us to do, like all of our cooks, all of our team, we're able to do it in our state for right now. They're probably going to pass a law that says we can't soon, but we do a hospitality charge. So we share in the profit. So we just basically do profit sharing amongst the whole team. And so, yes, guests can leave tips on top of it if they want. All of that can happen. But, you know, like if you're a line cook, I mean, you can make $40,000, $50,000 a year in Minneapolis. That's different than how I grew up.
As opposed to here.
Yeah.
So I was going to talk about differences between Minneapolis and New York, but I think we can just kind of go back to what we just said before, which is like primary and secondary cities. So talk about a little bit about the differences, whether it be New York and Minneapolis or other cities, but what do you see as the differences between them, opportunity, pros and cons?
You know, I'd say one of the biggest cons that we deal with is just the density of people, both from the guest perspective and workers. You know, there's not a lot of density. So, you know, we are fortunate that we get a lot of people who work for us that are moving back to the Twin Cities from being somewhere else. In fact, almost all of my chefs who work for me, who are chefs in the restaurants, moved back to Minneapolis from Singapore. One moved back from Singapore. One moved back from Detroit. One moved here from New York City. But they're all from Minnesota. They all grew up there. So they just moved back home. So that's a con. The pro is that if you build a restaurant like that, they will move back for you if you build the right thing. You have a question? Yeah, St. Paul.
And I've been living in New York. I came here to go to school here in the US. And after 25 years of doing that and cooking food for myself, what was the biggest adjustment for you socially going back to smaller cities? And has Minneapolis changed enough for the restaurant initiative that you're doing?
Good questions. I'd say the biggest difficulty going back, although I have to answer this in a way that might not be as normal as if I wasn't opening a restaurant and was in the media a lot, right? But Minneapolis in general is a little bit less friendly. You know, it's a smaller town. It's not there. Like New York is huge. So like you meet so many different people from so many different cultures all the time. And I feel like Minnesota is a very cliquey, has a lot of cliques.
More provincial.
Yeah, which is what it is. I'm not really part of any of that because when I'm not working, I'm with my kids and I'm in their clique if they accept me, which is basically meaning I'm helping them with sports. And then to your second question, is Minneapolis ready for it? It is. Yeah, it is a lot. I mean, it's changed a lot since COVID days for us. And I think a big factor in it changing the right way is that the media locally were willing to write about more than just the same old people. And that's important. You know, when you're in a secondary city, you know, you need to be able to push the guest and the media and yourselves to think differently than how you are serving your food. And that has to change. That has to change at the core nucleus, you know? And so we've seen it change in the last 3-4 years. And it's nice to see it. You know, we just had, I was saying to them earlier, I mean, two of my chefs who worked for me, one worked for me for 8 years, one worked for me for 7. They just went off and opened their own restaurants, which is awesome to see, because then you just start to see the family tree. And, you know, by the way, what they're opening have no, like it's nothing we would do. There's no competition in what they're creating for food, but it's in dialogue that they're creating for the community. So, yeah, of course.
That brings up an interesting segue. So, you know, during COVID here, you know, New York City lost a ton of people, a lot that they've never gotten back.
Yeah.
For the most part, I believe a lot of them went to secondary cities. So did places like Minneapolis benefit from that?
Yeah, I think a lot of secondary cities benefited a lot from that. You know,
didn't mean someone could go out and eat, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, and
people if you wanted them.
Well, and we lost a lot of people through that process too. We lost a lot of people that got out of the business completely. You know, and what I think it taught I think what it taught a lot of people who have stayed in the business is that institutional knowledge that a lot of these folks carried around with them in their head has a lot of value and worth. And there was a lot of oversight in acknowledging that amount of value and worth. And so that knowledge went away. And it might not ever come back, or it'll take a decade to come back. But I know for a fact that a lot of companies now think differently about how to communicate that with their teams, and how to extract that knowledge and then how to give back on that knowledge too.
Okay, let's go to another subject. The Mentor Foundation.
Yeah.
I believe you're the president of the Americas. You're working with Thomas Keller and Chef Gavin. So talk a little bit about that.
So Mentor was created, we just passed our 15-year anniversary. So I did the Bocuse d'Or in 2007. Do any of you know what Bocuse d'Or is?
Okay. You should probably explain.
So I'll explain it. So it's an international cooking competition. It happens every 2 years in Lyon, France. And Paul Bocuse is obviously the founder. Bocuse d'Or means the golden Bocuse. So there's Bocuse d'Or, there's Bocuse d'Argent, which is the silver, and then Bocuse bronze. Easy enough. I did the competition in 2007 as the representative for the United States. There's one chef who represents each country. You're allowed one assistant to go with you that has to be under the age, I think, of 21, maybe 22, by the time you compete. So when I did it, there was no foundation, which is fine, but I put myself in debt around $250,000. I think I had like 11 credit cards, pretty much maxed to the top. And I thought it was really absurd how it costs so much money to go and cook for 5.5 hours, and then 12 bites later, you're determined the best in the world, or you're not, and you're in debt $250,000. And so I was not working for Danielle at the time. It was pre him. Then I got my job with Danielle, and I came here, and he said, would you be interested in doing the Bocuse d'Or again? And I said, 100%, I'm in. He says, what do you need? Now, mind you, I had just accepted the role as executive chef of Café Bleu, which meant my life was going to be at Café Bleu, right? And he says, what do you need? And I said, I need 6 months off and $500,000. And he's like, okay, so we're not going to do that. Let's build a foundation. Which I understood, right? I knew what needed to be done. So Paul Bocuse had called Danielle, his son Jerome, and Danielle, and asked if they would be interested in creating a foundation for the United States. Danielle called Thomas and asked Thomas if he would be interested in being the president for Team USA at the time. Thomas accepted after some conversation, and then we built the organization. And so Mentor is really, it's a very important organization that does a couple of things. One, it trains Team USA for this cooking competition, which I'm now the president for. But secondly, what it does is it gives grant scholarships to young culinarians around the world, around our country. And you can travel around the world. So I want to say we've given away, I think it's a little over $2.5 million so far. But effectively, the goal behind that was, when I went to Switzerland and worked in Switzerland, or when Thomas worked in France or whatever, you basically would knock on a back door. They would open the back door, and they would either accept you or kick you out, and you'd get paid nothing, literally nothing. Yep. And we thought that was quite absurd. And by the way, it doesn't really help. It doesn't really help all of the people. It helps a very finite group of people that can afford to go work somewhere and not get paid. Okay, so we decided to scrub that and get rid of that idea. And rather, the students apply, or the cook applies. There's a board that reviews the applications. And let's say you wanted to go work in Japan for 3 months. You would get a scholarship to go work in Japan for 3 months. And then the restaurant you were working at, you would promise them that you would come back, because that was very important. And you would work in that restaurant for another year, right? But we would pay your salary while you were away. We'd help find lodging for you. We'd help set up the airfare and all of those things. So I just had a young chef from one of my restaurants. He was in San Francisco for 2 months. My pastry chef was in Bali, Indonesia. She was there for about 2.5 months. I had another sous chef who was in Australia for 2 months. So it's pretty amazing. It's a remarkable way to see the world. It's a remarkable way to expose each other to things that are outside of our core circle. And honestly, it's the right way to do it.
Very cool. Yes.
The typical
Yeah, Rick. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, they're out of school a couple of years. They've been cooking in the industry. They have a solid foundation where, and to be honest with you, most of the time, the people that they have a resume that says, I worked at Per Se for a year, I worked at Danielle for a year, I worked at 11 Madison Park for 2 years. Now I want to go work at Noma for this internship. You could probably get that on your own. I'm not sure you need us. We're interested in finding people that might not be able to get that externship on their own. So usually they're in the industry working. Yeah, like if you get out in the industry and you're working, yeah, and you have time and you're able to do it, and you can talk to the chef who you're working for, and they're accepting of that opportunity. I mean, it's hard. It's hard on the business. I mean, every year I've had cooks leave me for 2 months to go do this, and it's really tough. Like, everybody has to make a sacrifice for them to do that. But it is what it is.
Okay, so you have a foundation and you have a restaurant group. Give me a little feeling for a day in the life.
Oh, I guess it depends on the day. Yeah, I mean, so I actually the other day,
you're a routine guy.
I am a routine guy. So, I get up very early in the morning. I get up at like 5:36. I've got some time before I have a 2-year-old. So when I have some time before my 2-year-old gets up. Then I sort out lunch and breakfast for the other two, drop them off at school. I go to the gym. Then I go to work. I get to work by probably 10, 9:30, 10, something like that. And then I'm there. Every day can be a little bit different based on which restaurant's open. But if it's a Thursday or a Friday, as an example, I typically have meetings or some sort of commitments up until probably 5:30. And then I sort of bounce around. I start at Spoon and Stable. Then I go to Demi from 6:30, 6:45 to 7:30. Then I go to Mara until 9. Then I go back to Demi until 10. And then I go back to Spoon. And then I go home. Go to bed, do it all over again.
About 5 hours sleep.
Yeah, that's good. I sleep good.
That's good.
5 to 7 hours. Depends. It depends. Yeah. Sure. I would say the number one thing I look for is curiosity. I'm interested in how cooks.
I've said that many times. Yeah,
I'm interested in how cooks can do technically, but I'm more curious if they're curious. Because if they're not curious and they think that they're technicians, if they think they're technically sound and they're not curious, they're farther away than they realize, which means I have to break them down quicker than they realize. And then that's not as much fun. So curiosity is really important. Discipline is really important. It doesn't have to be just discipline in the kitchen. And what I mean by discipline is that they are self-disciplined. Eye contact is really important. That seems to have gone away a lot. Confrontation is really important. And confrontation was how to resolve confrontation. Another thing that seems to have gone away a lot.
Conflict resolution.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a trait that I'd rather not say anything to this cook over there. My partner, right? Let's say I'm on Garde and my PM Garde partner is leaving me behind every day. Instead of having conflict resolution and talking through it, they avoid it. That only compounds. So I look for traits like that. Yeah.
Okay, I think there's a little bit of a soft toss, but who are your mentors over the years?
Obviously, Danielle. Danielle's a huge mentor to me. Thomas is a huge mentor to me. Tracy Desjardins is a mentor to me. If you don't know who Tracy is, you should for sure Google her in the world of Google. Yeah, but both Danielle and Thomas have always been. I mean, I've worked side by side with them for 15 years, so I kind of have like one on one shoulder and one on the other shoulder, and they're exact opposites of one another, but they tend to want to achieve similar goals, and I think it's remarkable to see the difference in what those goals look like. I'm sure you guys know this story, but I mean, Thomas was fired from almost every job he basically ever had before he created the French Laundry. And, you know, he didn't create that, just like Danielle didn't create Danielle until they were 38, 39 years old. In today's world with social media and with this energy of trying to create everything at such like a young age, so damaging to what would have changed the trajectory of so many people's lives if it would have been like that 30 years ago too. And so I think a lot about that. I think a lot about that with my mentors and how, you know, ultimately patience and perseverance and goal setting was very important to them. Something that they still do. It's something I still do. I write goals every single year. I review them every single year and try to figure out what I achieved and what I didn't achieve. And I think that's important.
What do you see out there today in terms of interesting concepts, interesting chefs, interesting cuisine? Anything special kind of jump out at you?
I mean, there's a lot of special things I think that jumps out. I mean, I really love seeing that chefs are opening up and creating food that they can identify with and that means something personal to them. Mm-hmm. Meaning it doesn't all have to be French or Italian or, you know, certain ways. Like I like that chefs and operators are taking risk on cuisines that will ultimately test the clientele and the guests more. I think that that's really important. I think that's also important, and you see it in terms of hospitality. You know, there was this mad rush for QR codes during COVID, and then there's sort of like a mad rush to get away from it now. You know, so you see that pendulum always swinging back and forth. For me, what I've learned is that having a foundation of what you believe in terms of hospitality, cuisine, leadership, stay true to that foundation, because that pendulum around you will always swing. But when you stay true to what it is that your foundation is, nobody can really rock you off of that.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about also in terms of trends. Let's talk about menus. One of the things that became very prevalent, especially with new restaurants opening up, either right before COVID or especially once COVID hit, was kind of the shortening of menus,
Sure.
Tasting menus, 12-item menus.
Yeah.
You still see a lot of it around. You think it's here to stay, or you think we go back to the steakhouse type menus at some point?
I think I think it's going to stay for a while.
I agree.
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the costs in general have gone up a lot. I mean, I don't know, every state, every city is very different, but like in Minnesota and in Minneapolis, the way that political landscape is that it just keeps growing. The cost of everything keeps going up and up and up and up. Some of it's enforced upon us. But to be fair, most every restaurant that I know is already paying beyond what it is their terms are. But the food's going up. And all the surcharges and all these little things.
To do it is going up.
And all the labor's going up, and that's okay. But ultimately, it has to get passed on. And I think what COVID exposed is that it exposed that we never passed it on, or if we did, we weren't very vocal about it. So then we became very vocal about how hard of an industry it is and how little money we make. And while that sounded okay at the beginning, it kind of sounded pretty towards the end of like, well, if you keep saying it, like, shouldn't we do something about it? And so it's good to see that people are doing something about it. If that's a shortened menu, that's great.
Right. I think what we learned is diners are kind of okay with it as long as the food's really good.
Yeah, and honestly, I think they're okay with it too if you're transparent.
Yeah.
You know, I think that there has to be a sense of honesty with what it is that you're creating, and allow the guests to see, like, listen, the cost for the corn this year is this, the cost for the corn next year is this, and the price change. Which also means if it goes down, you need to have the price go down. You know, like you have to follow it too. You have to be honest through the process too. Otherwise, you don't gain the trust of the guest, and that's not fair.
What do you think about pricing changing over the course of the day?
I mean, I do it at Demi. So yeah, I mean, Demi is a tasting menu only restaurant. It's 20 seats. We do 2 seatings. We're open 5 nights a week. So we're closed Mondays and Tuesdays. Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday, it's a different price than Fridays and Saturdays. It's also a different menu. Okay, so there are less courses Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. We do about 6 or 7 courses on those 3 days because people want to eat faster, and it's a less cost. Fridays and Saturdays, people are willing to say, hey, I'm good with the night out with you. And so that's a 12 to 13 course meal. What's crazy is those 2 nights are the first 2 nights, the Friday and Saturday, are the first 2 nights to always be sold out first, despite the price, which tells me they're wanting to buy an experience, right? It's not about anything else other than that. But but we don't change the prices on the food that way. It's more the quantity.
So the way that we market over the years has changed dramatically. How do you guys market your restaurants? Do you rely a lot on PR, more on social media these days, or some combo?
Yeah, we do combo. You know, it's social media is a powerful beast when you want to use it and how you use it. And I think be careful because you can't let it be your identity all the time. But, you know, we have a really great director of communications who works for our company, and she monitors all the algorithms. She breaks everything down, so she sort of knows when to post things and why you need to post it versus not. We still see old school newsletters work when you have a call to action, like click on that button for a reservation. We still see check presenters work. You know, so we see a gamut of it. I mean, listen, I'm in the middle of the country, so, you know, I'm cooking for people that have a lot of tech savviness to, you know, my parents who are like, how do I open the iPhone again? Like, it's all good. Just walk up there and make the reservation. I mean, we have people who still want to call and make a reservation versus doing it online. So you've got to be able to sort of do both. And we're able to do that. Your question?
How in the Midwest, from my experience, I was working for Rachel Ray for a while, and her audience is like that Midwest,
Yeah.
you know, Missouri, Chicago, Minnesota.
Yeah.
And so we were always told that our ratings are based on the Midwest palate, which is chicken and beef.
Pork.
Yeah. How is a restaurant CEO in terms of their sustainability, becoming a little bit more plant-based, being a little more aware and health conscious of meat, for example, recommending zero meat, but because it's become a bigger topic in being healthier so that eat meat and consume more vegetables,
Mm-hmm.
how is that affecting or is it affecting at all the restaurant scene?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So we do a dinner series at Spoon and Sable called the Synergy Series, and we invite 4 chefs from around the country every year to come cook with us. And this past year, Daniel Hum was out there from 11 Madison Park, and so he did 2 nights. So the whole dinner is like they do 2 nights with us. We cook for about 130 people a night, and then on the second day before the dinner, we do a talk with him. And as you know, his whole meal and his whole menu is plant-based. And so we did a fully plant-based menu for 2 days. And it was remarkable to listen to the guests' response to that. Some were blown away that it wasn't meat. Some were blown away that they felt full. Some didn't even show up, regrettably, on their own accord because they felt they wouldn't like it. So, you know, I saw sort of 2 ends of the spectrum where you had the people that were really curious and excited to some guests who were like, there's no way we're going to come. You know, we still see a huge attraction in the Midwest towards meat. I mean, it's how they're raised as a culture. It's how the culture is raised as they're little. First complaint letter I ever got in Spoon and Sable was that I didn't cook with enough pork, which was so crazy. I mean, I've been cooking on the Upper East Side for 8 years. I mean, the majority of my clientele was Jewish, so I didn't cook with any pork. But it was like the first letter I got, like, you got to add more pork to this. I'm like, all right, you know. But we've seen it change slowly over time. You know, I don't expect it to be a dramatic change, but we're seeing restaurants that are opening that are more vegetable focused. While there's some meat that's still on it, there's more of a vegetable focused. And press or not, their restaurants are very busy.
Okay, 2 last questions for me, and then I'll open it up to anyone else that has questions. So it's just a good time to go into the restaurant business.
Yeah, I think it's always good. I mean, listen, it's not ever going to be easy, but I don't know. I'm this way.
Like,
Like,
you say you have to have a passion for it?
no, I just don't think anything's easy. So it doesn't matter to me what business you're in. Like when I hear people say, "Oh, you work so hard, it must be a lot of work. It's not easy." I'm like, I don't know anybody that is successful that's like, "Wow, that was really easy to get successful." Like I'm a walk in the park, you know, like it's always hard.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I think it's a great time to get into the restaurant business because Now more than ever, it's changing from an industry to a profession. And that's a really important difference.
Agreed.
We've always been known as an industry, and it's changing over to becoming a profession now. And so to become a profession means that you need to have all different walks of life come into the profession and create a stamp that's going to make sure it changes the right way. So for that reason, I think it's a great time to get in.
Perfect segue to the last question. So you have a room full of potential entrepreneurs / professionals. What's the best advice you can leave them with?
Stay curious, right? Ask a million questions, collaborate with other people. Don't be too scared to say, I don't know, what is that? And even if you're the leader, don't be scared to say, I'm not sure. Is that a good idea? I don't really know what that's going to. I think we get in our own way sometimes, you know, and we allow our ego to sort of take over and say, like, this is what I've dreamt to become, and now I'm there. And so I'm too afraid to go back to where I was. And I get that. But what got you to where you are was that you never thought that before. So like, hold on to that part. I journal a ton. I write a lot. And often when I need to find opportunity to reflect on what it is, if I'm going through some stuff at work or business is tough or whatever, I'll read some of my journals when I was like a 21-year-old cook in Switzerland, and just realizing that the problems that I had when I was 21 are no different now than when I'm 44. Nothing's changed except for the time and the location where I am. And I'm asking myself the same question then as I am now, which humanizes the fact that what I'm trying to figure out doesn't need to have a definite answer or an end to it. But that's sort of the journey.
Great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions from the audience? Yes.
What do you credit to gaining enough popularity to generate 600 reservations prior to your opening the story earlier?
Yeah, so you know, the press was pretty crazy when I left Café Boulud. It was a big deal because nobody expected me to leave Danielle. I was his right hand on so many things, and so, you know, once the press sort of grabs a hold of that, you the machine is what it is. It's really funny. I lived in New York for 8 years, and I've cooked for the New York Times more in Minneapolis than I ever did in New York City.
So traditional openings is not necessarily
Right. Yeah, and listen, when I opened Spoon, there was not a lot. I mean, I don't think social media was around as much as it is now. I mean, it was 10 years ago. Sure. But that restaurant sold out 2 months of reservations in about an hour and a half. And it was like that for 5 years. It was wild. It was absolutely wild. And it's still busy. I mean, you know, like yesterday was Sunday. I mean, you know, we did 380 people on a Sunday in Minneapolis between brunch and dinner. That's pretty good. But what kept us there is consistency. I have a publicist who helps manage the press, and I have a director of communications who helps manage what we're going to communicate to the press. So yeah, of course.
Yes.
You mentioned that your staff is paid a portion of the profit.
Yep.
Are you finding that that's industry standard, or is that kind of?
It can't be, because every state is very different in its laws. So while Minnesota allows us to do it that way right now, they're actually proposing in the Senate and the House to take that away from us, because they can't tax the individual employee as much as they want. And so they will end up changing it, most likely, but we'll figure out a way to still kind of profit share somehow. I did a case study with Danny Meyer's group at Business Harvard School, and it was really interesting because New York's laws are very different than Minnesota's laws, and that was the whole case study. Was like, why can I do it in Minneapolis, but you know, he couldn't? It didn't work here for him in New York City, and that was kind of the breakdown of it all. So we'll figure out another way to do it whenever they throw whatever they throw at us. But my purpose of it is that I think that everybody in the restaurant should see success when the restaurant sees success. And so in order to do that, we just have to change the way that is. That's that seems to be a way a lot of people are driving right now in my community, but I don't know where everybody else is doing. Yeah. 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 Yep. Sure. Yeah. I'd say write 2 sets of goals, short term. Okay. And then what do you want to accomplish in 5 years? And then revisit next year and see what you accomplished in the year and see if it's getting you closer to where you're going to be in 5 years. And keep doing that. You only have one opportunity to build your foundation. So I have a lot of cooks who work for me. So there was a cook who worked for me here in New York City. His name is Aaron Bludorn. He was my sous chef at Café Blud. Aaron worked for me for about 1.5 years. And he came to me and he said, Chef, I think I'd like to move on. I said, great, where do you want to go? And he says, I'm going to go work at 11 Madison Park. I said, cool. I said, what are you going to do there? He says, I'm going to be a line cook. I said, great. He was a line cook for me at the time, Aaron was. I said, what do you go do after that? He says, I think I want to go work at Per Se after that, and I want to cook at Per Se, and then maybe finish at Momofuku, and then I want to move back to Seattle, and I want to open my own restaurant. I said, that's cool. So you're going to work in 3 restaurants as a cook, and then you're going to know how to be an owner? I said, no. So I left. I said, you can't quit. And I left. 5 years later, he tried to quit 2 more times. I didn't even take the meeting. I didn't even show up. 5 years later, when I left Café Blud, I said to Aaron, I'm leaving Café Blud. You're going to be the chef of Café Blud now, and you're going to take my position because you're ready for that. And the only way you're going to become an owner is if you work for Danielle for the next 5 years and you understand what ownership looks like. Aaron now owns 3 restaurants in Houston, Texas. So take your time. You got time.
So like it's just more so like the ambition.
The ambition will never go away. But if your ambition is like this right now, you want to bring it to like this, right? So you're looking at everything and being like, I could do all of this, right? But you want to be like, I want to do only this. So take your time, you know. Go work for the best in LA. Walk up to that chef and say, I'm going to give you 2 years of my life. I'm going to give you 3 years of my life. And then after that, I want you to point me in the next direction. Thank you.
Good.
Sure. Yeah, we're about 273, I think, the last time we checked. Yeah. Fairly big number.
Yeah, right here.
So, from what I'm getting from a lot of guest speakers and stuff, we all started, y'all started from the kitchen and moved our way up to ownership. I'm taking a different route.
Sure.
By not being in the kitchen, but focusing more on the hospitality
Yeah.
aspect.
Yeah.
And then owning my own establishment from there.
Yeah.
So it's not that I don't love the cooking, but I'm more in love with the business side of things.
Sure.
And I don't know how many success stories is out there about somebody not start besides you. But people
I was just
that
gonna
started
chime in.
from the kitchen.
I mean, Danny Meyer's one.
Right.
You know?
No, but he studied also.
But he never cooked. He never really cooked.
Never cooked in a commercial kitchen.
Well, professional, yeah.
Yeah.
He never did professional.
I mean, there's a handful of very successful. I would say to you this: there's no mold that exists, and if it does, just break it. You know, like at the end of when it comes down to like ambition and drive and what it is that you want to achieve, anything is possible. You just have to believe it. It's only you that has to believe it. Your goal is then to get everybody else to believe what you already know is true.
It seems like you're big on affirmations and
Yeah.
writing down.
Yeah, I think it's super important. You got to put it out there. Otherwise, where's it going to exist?
The only thing I'm going to throw in is it is important to have a solid business background. You
Yeah.
can be the greatest chef in the world, the greatest line cook in the world, greatest general manager or bartender in the world. If you don't understand business at all, don't open your own business. It's the biggest mistake we make in our business, period. It's not undercapitalization. We're undercapitalized because we don't understand the capital we needed in the first place. Again, we didn't understand our business.
Yeah, it's very true.
My
I
fault.
mean, it's very true.
Rick.
Yeah, just to add to that, your comment out there, I mean, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, leader, manager, why not be a manager for somebody else first and, contribute to their success?
Yeah.
Good point.
And I really, work, help someone else open something and act like you're the owner, right, from their time, and you learn from that. I often, as an entrepreneur, I can see the difference between other places and being an entrepreneur.
It's a different game.
A lot more hours.
Yeah.
But that all leads to an unrelated question. And it's about just sort of your observation on restaurant concepts. And, you were, I knew your story in advance, but you're an incredible example of, the harder I work, the luckier I get. Your mentors were amongst the most mentorious mentors
Yeah.
in America, and it set you up for success. It couldn't guarantee it, but it set you up and reservations. But when you look around, your market or friends, what mistakes or good choices in terms of the restaurant side, too much, or sort of why things work, why they don't.
Yeah, I think in my market specifically, location is so important. One thing that doesn't exist here that exists in Minneapolis is parking. Parking is super important. And it's a problem in a lot of states. Can the guest drive there and park? Is there valet? What does the valet cost in conjunction with street parking? Our city council wants to abolish Uber and Lyft come May 1st this year.
Wow.
Imagine if that goes away, if that happens. They're all at city council right now with the mayor. They're doing a press conference as we're speaking. The mayor doesn't want to do it, but the city council wants to get rid of it. And so,
Congestion? What's the reason?
They just want Uber and Lyft to pay their drivers 80% more than what they're making or something. It's crazy. I mean, it shouldn't have it. No city council government should go to a corporation and say such a thing and then be okay with it. But nonetheless, it is what it is. But that's something that's very important, right? Because that not only takes away the guests, but it takes away workers from getting there.
Now you need more parking.
Yeah. So like we see that. I see restaurants open, Rick, sometimes in my market that the location is just it's so bad, and it's just not going to work. We also see a lot of seasonality. We have so many lakes in the Twin Cities. So if you build a restaurant near or on a lake, your summer months are great, but your winter months are dismal. They're gone. They're dead. Because the wealthiest folks in the Twin Cities, they have 2 or 3 homes, whether it's in Cabo, Arizona, Florida, and so they're not there in the winter. So they might be a good chunk of your profit in the summer months, but if they're not there in the winter, that can be an exceptional issue. Yeah.
We have time for another question?
One right here.
Oh, sorry. I did see.
So when you were starting the businesses, and you didn't have your family, how did you find that balance between work and life so you didn't burn yourself out in the meantime before you had to step in the trust to actually take the time out?
Yeah, good question. I don't think I ever really looked for balance. I pretty much only looked for a bit of harmony. Balance didn't exist. It just doesn't. I just don't. It's just like, their balance always set me up for failure, because I ended up failing at being balanced. And so I tried to make sure to not set myself up for that per se. And And so there are certainly times, this goes back to being disciplined. Like if you're disciplined in the kitchen, and like, let's say you take off every Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm going to make it up. You know, be disciplined about taking off Tuesday and Wednesday, but like find something to do in those days. Trust is really hard to do with staff. I have a chef who works for me now, and he's newer into being the chef de cuisine. He's been a sous chef for me for 5 years. And I can see him having difficulty with trusting people. He got sick. He had the flu for like 4 days, and he didn't come to work. And I'm like, you see, the restaurant still worked. It's okay. You know, it doesn't mean that your worth is any less. It just means that you taught them the right way to do it while you're not there. You figure it out.
Yes. Last question.
Yeah, there's two really good books. There's one book called The Diary of a CEO. If you've never read it, you can listen to it. If you don't like to read, you want to just listen to it when you're
Audible.
on the train. Have you read it?
Yeah, I've listened to it.
You listen to it. It's a great book. It's an incredible book. There's another really good book. It has to do with sports, but it's called 11 Rings. Phil Jackson wrote it. If you haven't read that or listened to that, it's another good one. Talks a lot about leadership. His style of leadership is very different. It's very how he breaks down running a team, an athletic team, and a very egotistical team. Both of them, actually. Both teams that he ran. So those are some books to check out.
All right.
Thank
Chef
you.
Kaysen,
Yeah, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
that was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, of course.
It's funny. I must have come across you